have a commenter here who's been accused of being a hater because she's had some concerns about some behavior that she deems to be unethical. She says, "Hello, doctor. I love your work. Do you mind speaking on the Cheyenne Bryant case? It's troubling because there are so few Black women with such qualifications. I'd love to hear what your thoughts on this are." It's troubling that as a Black woman myself, I'm being told that I'm hating on a pretty girl when my issue is the lying, the dishonesty, and the tricking the public into believing her story and taking her thoughts seriously. So I can't talk about Dr. Bryant specifically, but here's what I will talk about. I kind of try to stay away from that stuff, and I'm very aware of the controversy. But one of the things that I will talk about is this: um, within the Black community. And I've done several posts on this where I've talked about television in the Black community. There's there is a negative stigma against therapy. And so when you have a community that has a negative stigma, and I'm not saying everybody, but I'm just saying that there's a lot of people that feel like therapy isn't it for me. And so what they rather, within the Black community, what they'd rather do is they'd rather take advice from elders. They'd rather take advice from coaches or, stylists and barbers and things like that, or even friends. And that is their form of therapy, right? And then you have people that are like that because they don't want the stigma of feeling like they're crazy. Like, I want to talk to somebody, but I don't want to be deemed as crazy. I don't want to be diagnosed with something and being forced to do something. I don't want to. I don't want to become emotionally dependent on another professional. I hear that these are things that I've heard from people quite a bit over the years. Because you have people that just really dog therapy out. They hate it. And psychiatry as well. So that whole, you have that. They're like, nope, that hasn't been good to us. And historically, I can understand why people would say, why why a community would say that they have distrust around, the mental health or medical community. I can understand it. However, so there's that community over there. However, you have another community that's like, um, there's a lot of people out there that believe in credentials, degrees, expertise, and things like that, and they want the treatment, and you have people that myself, I'm quite neurotic about it. When I go to the doctor, I'm like, oh gosh, I need someone that's not going to dismiss me, that has the credentials, that has the training, that has a background that could definitely help me out. Out of my thing. So you have two different camps of people, right? And then with that first camp of people, they don't care about credentials. They care like, does this resonate with me? Does this make sense? That's all I need to know. I'll pay for that. I don't care. That's all I need to know. A professional is going to dismiss me. They're going to tell me, a licensed professional, right, that goes to a big school, they're going to tell me, they're going to tell me something and they're going to dismiss me and things like that. And they're going to make me feel small. They're going to make me crazy. So I don't trust that already, right? And then you have the other side that's like, no, I want that. I want people that are honest and, have integrity and have credentials and have done the work to back up things. So there's two different camps of people. When you're from one camp, it's going to be hard to have a conversation and discussion with the other camp, if that makes sense. So if you're heavily into, degrees and honesty and like following somebody who has, this license, and you have a problem with that, the other folks, um, you're not going to be able to have a conversation about that with other folks because they're just like, well, I don't need all that. So and I learned this, again, from working with people over the years who've been very distrustful of mental health, medicine, and everything like that. When they're die hard against that, it's going to be an uphill battle to have a conversation with them or disagreement, to try to get them on board of like why this is an issue. Their whole thing is, am I being helped? Does it make sense? Well, what else do you need? It doesn't really matter. And if you try to have that argument, like I need someone who's honest about credentials and things like that, they're going to say, you know what? You're just trying to bring a person down. All I know is this person's helped me more than anybody with credentials has. And so this and that, and the other thing. So if you have, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm not saying that the other person is, I'm not saying people from the other camp are wrong, because um, when you can understand, you can understand the fear, you can understand bias, and discrimination that one community has faced. You can understand a lot of the fixated beliefs around certain things, and I can understand where you're coming from. Like I have issues with someone who's lying to me and who's being dishonest about things like that. So I can understand both camps, but the one thing I will say is that it's very rare that someone from each camp can understand or at least communicate their concerns with the other without it being dismissed, without there being an argument. And I've even seen this argument come up within families. So one of the things that I will say is that you have to treat your medical and mental health. You have to address your concerns your way, and then the other camp will have to deal with things their way, and kind of go about that. I've been in my business, I've been in mental health and things like that for a long time. So that, you kind of see, you've seen it all, but, when you have someone, if you have someone that has a fan club or a following or that has helped people, people feel like they've been helped or been moved by that person within our community. You will have an uphill battle if you express concerns. And so it's not one that I encourage. I can educate the public, but I don't encourage, necessarily going after a particular person. If you're fighting within your community, if that makes sense, because you may end up with more backlash than you are with understanding and sympathy. There are a lot of great licensed mental health professionals out there, African American and medical professionals that are available to treat. But, there's people that don't want that. And so, you know, just do what you can for yourself. And I could certainly do another post educating on credentials and things like that and why it's important. I understand your values and things of that nature, and those are things that are very important. But you know, so I hope that makes sense, and I hope I didn't ramble too much. But comment, and let me know what you think about this. One last point that I will add, just as general, anytime you speak out against something that you feel like is unethical or lacks integrity, more often than not, the person who speaks out will almost always get the backlash, be censored, get all the things, versus persons that are alleged to be doing egregious behavior. We've seen that play out on many different levels. You've seen it, that's, I hope that helps. Thanks so much.